The 28th floor bathroom at Harper and Moore was silent, but inside Ethan Carter's chest, chaos reigned. His heart raced uncontrollably, his chest felt tight, as if someone was crushing him from the inside. His breath was short, gasping, insufficient. He was going to die. He couldn't think of any other explanation. Sweat trickled down his neck and soaked his dress shirt. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely support himself on the marble sink. The mirror reflected a man he barely recognized. Wide eyes, dilated pupils, a face as pale as paper. He tried to take a deep breath. No air came. Panic took over. It was a heart attack. It had to be. The world around him became distant, as if he were seeing everything through frosted glass. The noises from the office on the other side of the door seemed far away. He couldn't die here, not in the office bathroom. With effort, he pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and tried to dial a number, but his fingers were so numb he could barely hold the device. That's when the bathroom door opened. Ethan held his breath. He tried to compose himself. Two colleagues walked in, talking. "Dude, did you see what happened in the meeting?" "Yeah. He totally froze up." Ethan's stomach churned. They were talking about him. He closed his eyes. If he died there, no one would miss him. Or maybe it was better that way. Ethan didn't remember how he managed to leave work. He only knew that half an hour later he was in a taxi, his face pressed against the window, trying not to throw up. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Ethan hesitated. The hospital? A cardiologist? He needed a doctor. "Emergency room," he replied, his voice weak. When he arrived, he could barely explain what he was feeling to the receptionist. He just sat in the waiting room, clutching his chest, certain that he would have a heart attack at any moment. A nurse called him and took his blood pressure. It was a little high, but nothing alarming. His blood oxygen was normal. The on-call doctor ordered an electrocardiogram. The minutes passed slowly. Ethan sweated cold as he stared at the white walls. He needed to know what was wrong with him. When the doctor returned with the results, he smiled slightly. "Your heart is perfectly healthy, Mr. Carter," Ethan frowned. "But then what was that?" "I thought I was dying." The doctor leaned his elbows on the desk. "What you had was a panic attack. This happens when the body reacts to stress as if it's facing a real danger, even when there's no physical threat." Ethan blinked a few times. "Panic attack? But I've never had one before." "That doesn't mean it can't happen now. Have you been feeling a lot of stress lately?" Ethan laughed humorlessly. "Work, bills, deadlines, the usual." The doctor wrote something on a pad. "I recommend you see a psychologist. Anxiety, when left untreated, can become debilitating." Ethan shook his head. Anxiety. He didn't want to be that guy. The first week after the hospital was strange. Ethan went back to work as if nothing had happened, but now the fear was always there. He felt his heart race for no reason. He sweated, he felt dizzy. The worst were the thoughts. What if it happens again? What if it's a real heart attack this time? What if I get sick in front of everyone? The fear consumed him. One day, while typing an email, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He dropped the keyboard immediately. His vision blurred for a second. Not again. He grabbed the desk, trying to hold on. His colleagues continued talking around him, oblivious to what was happening inside him. Desperation was greater than pride. That night, he looked for a therapist. The therapy room was comfortable. Plush rugs, wooden bookshelves, a cozy armchair, but Ethan felt like he didn't belong there. In front of him, Jonas Harding, an experienced therapist, watched him patiently. "So, Ethan, what brings you here?" Ethan crossed his arms. "My doctor said I had a panic attack, but I don't think that's what it was." Jonas tilted his head. "What do you think it was?" "Something with my heart, or a neurological problem. This can't just be anxiety." Jonas smiled slightly. "Are you afraid it will happen again?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes, all the time." Jonas rested his elbows on the table. "Then maybe it's not just a physical problem." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Ethan wondered if the doctor was right. What if he really was sick, but the illness wasn't physical? Therapy wasn't easy. Ethan wanted quick solutions, but all Jonas said was, "This doesn't go away overnight, but every time you face the fear, it loses strength." He didn't want to face it. He wanted it all to disappear. But life didn't work that way. The challenge came when his boss scheduled an important meeting. What if I freeze up again? What if I have another crisis? What if they run out of the room when they see me sweating? The thoughts came, but this time he didn't avoid them. He accepted the fear and, even so, went to the meeting. Sitting at the table, he felt his heart race. His hands trembled under the table. But then he heard Jonas's voice in his mind. "This doesn't define you. You are stronger than the fear." "Ethan, can you update us on your progress?" Silence. His mouth went dry. He felt the panic approaching, but this time he didn't run. He took a deep breath and spoke. His voice was shaky, but he continued. And when he finished, he realized something. Nothing happened. His boss nodded. The meeting continued. Ethan survived. He was still afraid. He would still have bad days, but now he knew he could face them. And that made all the difference. Cases like Ethan's remind me how much fear can become an invisible prison. He wasn't just fighting anxiety. He was fighting the idea that he needed to be flawless to be accepted. He believed that if he failed, if he showed vulnerability, if he trembled before an audience, then he would cease to be who he was. But fear doesn't erase our identity. It just makes us believe we are less than we really are. Since that first crisis in the company bathroom, Ethan believed he had lost something essential, that he would never again be the confident professional, the secure man, the person who knew exactly what to do. But in fact, he never lost anything. He just needed to learn to see himself in a new way. The real weight of anxiety isn't just in the symptoms, the cold sweat, the shortness of breath, the racing heart. The greater weight is in the story we create about ourselves because of it. For a long time, Ethan looked at that meeting as the moment when everything fell apart. But what if instead it was the moment when he began to rebuild himself? Today, for the first time, he faced the fear without running. And even though it was difficult, even though his voice trembled, even though his heart raced, he realized he was capable. This doesn't mean he will never feel fear again, nor that anxiety will disappear like magic. But now he knows he can live with it, and more importantly, he knows it doesn't define who he is. Ethan's anxiety is not a mistake, nor a sign of weakness. It's just part of his story, and every story can be reframed. I know his path will still be long. There will still be difficult days, moments of doubt, relapses. But for the first time, he began to understand that he doesn't need to be perfect to be enough. And sometimes that's the only truth we need to start freeing ourselves. I will be here to guide him, until one day he realizes that he has always been strong enough to walk alone.